Good evening everyone, and welcome. Before the video begins, you need to be aware that this month I am hosting a mega giveaway. So listen up to hear how it works. There are 10 surprise mystery boxes up for grabs. A new box will be available every 3 days. And to enter, all you need to do is leave a comment, a like, press the little bell icon and be subscribed to Mortis Media. However, there is one small eensy-beensy detail. You have to have left a like and comment on each video that came out in the 3 days in order for your entries to count. Today is the final day of giveaway number 1. So the winner of the first box will be announced in tomorrow's video. Assuming, of course, that they have left a like and comment on today's video, yesterday's, and the day before that. Get what I mean? Don't worry though. There is also going to be a handful of consolation prizes to those of you who didn't win the box, and will only be eligible for those of you who have commented and liked every video in May. Best of luck everyone. But for now, it is time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This story is something that happened to me and my grandma when I was around 6 or 7. For context, I am a girl, and at the time, I was living in a city that was somewhat small, but is politically important. So it always had an airport. My aunt was flying in, and as she lived in another city for ages, we were very excited to welcome her at the airport. We made our way out to the gate that people came out of after picking up their luggage. I remember being very chatty whilst waiting. And at some point, my grandma grabbed my hand really hard and gave me a look that just meant, shut up. I thought I had said something wrong, but after a while, I realized she was trying to listen to the people that were standing next to us. They seemed to be fighting a lot, and my grandma has always been very gossipy. I looked over at them, and they were an old man and a very pregnant woman that were discussing something which didn't interest 7-year-old me. So I ignored it. And now some things get fuzzy in my memory. So I will recount to you what my grandmother told me. I remember the old man screaming something to the effect of, "There he is, I'm going to get him," over and over, until this man leaves departures and emerges through the sliding glass doors. Then I just remember that people all around started screaming, and my grandma threw me on the ground and laid on top of me. I heard noises like fireworks and screams, and feeling suffocated both by my grandma and some sort of weird smell, and also by how hot it was underneath her. So I was feeling really bad and started screaming myself. I tried to push her off, and for a moment raised my head and saw a lot of red come close to my face on the ground, and lots of people laying down, with hands on their heads. Everything smelt really bad and hot. I don't really know how to describe it. At this point, my grandma pushed my head forcefully down to the ground and whispered, "Stop and play dead now," in the most serious voice I had ever heard from her. I didn't understand what was happening before that, and was quite angry with my grandma for being so forceful. But as she said this, I began to understand that it was serious, and I got quiet really fast while trying not to cry. At some point, she got off me and carried me behind a large pillar. I remember feeling very shaky in the legs, as if I had no strength. But there was a police officer who told me everything was going to be alright. There were other people there who looked scared too, and we just sat down in silence for some time, while we heard police talking and the old man crying and screaming very loudly. Then it got really quiet, and I remember being taken to a room where I had to say what I knew to more officers for a while until we could go. When they took me there, an officer used his hand to cover my eyes in the way, and I remember feeling just angry and tired of being handled around. I tried to take his hands off me and saw just for a moment the pregnant woman lying on her back, and this image remains in my head since that day. For the details that my grandma told me later on. She told me the truth only a few years ago, and the time this took place, she just explained to me that a very bad man did bad things and was arrested, and that I shouldn't worry about it. But as she explained recently, what happened was the old man was the woman's father, and apparently she was very young and got pregnant by this guy, Dick, who then just ran away and abandoned her. He was coming back because she had recently been in touch and he had reconsidered about being a father. Except when her father found out about this, he was very angry and wanted to enact revenge on Dick for leaving in the first place. My grandma said she learnt this on the news later, but in the airport, she heard the father talking about how Dick ruined her life and had to pay, and how he wasn't going to let anyone treat her like that, and she kept telling him that she loved this guy and that he had come around and not to do anything. I should also add that maybe abortions aren't legal here, and that the only way to get one is either paying a lot of cash for someone to do it illegally, or getting sketchy drugs from sketchy people, which can result in a lot of bad stuff. As you may have guessed, her father had a gun, and as Dick came out of the glass door with his luggage, he whipped it out, and that's when people started screaming, and my grandma throws me on the ground, and also when everyone else got on the ground too. Except he didn't just kill that guy. Apparently, he was either too emotional or had never done it before and couldn't aim right, and hurt some other people too who took grazing bullets or got shot in non-fatal places. While this was happening, the woman keeps screaming that she loves her baby and that her dad managed to aim right as she threw herself in the way. Both her, Dick, and the baby were killed instantly. My grandma said that this happened really fast, and the police showed up as he shot them. This is when the old guy calms down for a bit, or at least isn't trying to shoot anyone anymore. So there's a lot of police trying to get the gun from him, and people just start to get up and hide. And this is when we go and hide behind the pillar. It takes a few minutes, but he just lets go of the gun, probably sad that he just killed his daughter and grandchild, and the police take him away. I think it took the police some time to show up, because at the time it was a very small airport, and low in crime and such. My grandma said the whole thing happened in about 20 minutes, but to me, it felt like ages. As I only talked to my grandma recently about this, I hadn't realised how close we had been to the old man and his daughter, and that, when I saw red just a few inches from my nose, I was no doubt looking at the blood of someone else. I'm forever grateful that she protected me so well, and I hadn't even realised the situation we were in until recently. Oh, and about my aunt. As soon as the shooting started, people inside the sliding glass doors were told to go back to the corridor, so my aunt was completely safe when we managed to get her. I am a 20-year-old female, and this took place back in March. I was 19 years old at the time. It was the end of spring break, and I was returning to Texas from California. I had just spent my vacation with my sister who lives in San Francisco. Every college kid counts down the days until spring break, and my vacation had gone rather well. However, I was slightly okay with returning to the essays and research papers, because I missed my friends, my bed, and my cat. Maybe not in that particular order. I was flying alone, something I don't like doing for multiple reasons, and had only one layover in Dallas. I don't like traveling alone because I've had some bad experiences, and I happen to look a lot younger than 20. Most often people say I look 13 or 14 at most, and I've always hated that about myself. But I'm told I'll be grateful when I'm older. As of now, it's just immensely frustrating. The last time I was on a plane by myself, the attendant thought I was an unaccompanied minor named Taylor. I quickly assured her I was not the minor in question. The time before that, I was asked to move away from the emergency exit because I had to be at least 16 to sit there, which obviously I was. Anyway, my boyfriend was picking me up from the airport, and I was excited. I wore the pink members only jacket he had bought for me and tried to look my best, which is difficult when traveling. When the plane arrived in Dallas, we had some really terrible weather, and the turbulence was scary. But no matter. Soon I would be on another flight to Houston. I took the train around to the C terminal and made my way to my gate, only to find out that due to torrential rain and lightning, my flight had been cancelled. I was crushed, but determined, so I took my ticket to be exchanged for a later flight. It seemed many others had the same grievance and were open to do the same. As I was standing in line, a friendly-looking older man came up to stand behind me. "Are you alone?" he asked. Everyone seemed to be conversing with one another, complaining about the weather and pondering their options to get home. It didn't seem like a big deal, because strangers always seem to connect in situations like this one. We were all frustrated, and I also felt safe in the crowded airport, so I answered him truthfully and continued to wait in line. The man behind the counter said I was in luck, that there were only 2 seats left on another flight to Houston, and that I could make it if I hurried. I rushed to board the train to Terminal A to catch my new flight, and upon reaching the gate, was faced with the same situation. This new flight was cancelled too. The man from before had followed me to the gate and was in the same boat. I exchanged my ticket for an even later flight and resolutely marched myself to the new gate, only to be told the same as before. Literally, 2 or 3 more times on top, because I really didn't want to give up and had no other options. The man shadowed me during the entire ordeal, but I didn't really find it strange. We were just 2 individuals stranded in an airport after all. The last gate I went to, I noticed that he was still following me. He walked over to me and begins to chat about that awful luck that we were having. Someone is eavesdropping nearby and suggests that I rent a car. I politely tell them that I am not old enough, and the man smiles and said to me, "Well, I'm old enough to rent a car. How about this? I'll rent one, you can sleep and I'll drive." I look at him, and the way he is staring at me legitimately scares me. I finally begin to feel that something is off, and I respond, no, but thank you. I'm going pretty far." His smile falters for a moment, then he suggests that he buys me some food. I am starving, and I am tempted. I hesitate for a moment, but then I remember a book I'd read about a girl who was stolen from the airport after a man drugs her coffee. This gives me the strength to deny my grumbling stomach and decline him again. He follows me. I don't know why. He's already told me that he's going to rent a car and leave. He points to a Mexican restaurant and says, "Ooh, how about this place?" He has this strange look on his face and is standing far too close to me. I shake my head and say, "I told you I'm not really hungry," which is a lie, even though I can smell something delicious, and I almost give in. But my face does not betray my hunger, and I keep my pace. Okay, what about burgers then?" He looks a bit annoyed. This guy does not give up easily. I ignore him, and this causes him to glare at me angrily, and then just walk away. I breathe a sigh of relief and I call my sister to tell her about him. Not in a catty sort of way, just a "wow, that guy was persistent" kind of thing. I settle into a chair to think about my options. I feel pretty alone and worried. My latest ticket has me leaving around midnight, and it was about 9 p.m. At that point, I had been in the airport since 5 p.m. If this last flight didn't work out, I had no clue what I would do. I had no money for a hotel, and didn't fancy sleeping in a chair. The last time I fell asleep in public, which was on a train in France, a lady attempted to steal my backpack. But that is another story. I look up about 30 minutes later to see the very same man from before walking towards me. I tucked my legs up in my chair nervously and pretended to play on my phone. "Hey, still here?" he asks. He seemed to have cooled down. I just stare at him, and he clears his throat and tries again. "So I was thinking you should come and stay at my aunt's house with me for the night. That's where I'm staying tonight. It would be no problem. You just don't want to be in this airport all night, all alone." I shake my head. "No, I'm fine." Then I turn my attention back to my phone. I didn't even make eye contact. I felt really uncomfortable, and he tries to convince me, and I have to say no firmly several more times. He looks angry, really angry. His hands are clenched and his smile is obviously fake. It looks as if he will shatter his teeth if he clenches his jaw any tighter. I wonder to myself why he hasn't left the airport yet. Then I notice his luggage is no longer with him. He was rolling it behind him, and now he isn't. Where would he have put it if he hadn't just left it? And so much time had passed. Why is he back here? As I'm thinking all of this, he is just standing there, staring at me. After what feels like forever, he storms off again. So I feel anxious because of him. So anxious, in fact, that I grabbed my things and moved to a different gate to wait. My phone was quickly depleting in its charge, and I didn't want to be without it. So I charge it and plug it into the outlet in the floor. I curled up in the aisle between the chairs to wait. My sister called about an hour later, and I was talking to her, telling her how creepy the dark weather outside looked. When I see him, again, walking around, glancing here and there, obviously in search of me. I hunched down even further, but my pink jacket put me like a beacon. He locked eyes with me, and I looked down. My sister said to stay on the phone, so I did. "Well, there you are," he said, not even acknowledging that I am in the middle of a phone call. I continue talking to my sister. When it becomes apparent that he isn't leaving, and doesn't care that I am on the phone, I finally look up. "So you're still here? Look, you need to come with me. You can stay at my grandparents' tonight. They would love to have you. They wouldn't mind me bringing you at all. Just come with me." I got chills. I don't know why, but something in his eyes told me that he was lying. Lying through those shiny white teeth of his. "You said you were staying with your aunt." His face dropped. It went from cool and collected to something else. Not even anger this time, and not defeat either. Almost like amusement. Something like the cat that ate the canary. He shrugs his shoulders like, "I tried." But we both recognized that he was caught in his lie. The entire time my sister was saying, "Hello, hello," over the phone repeatedly. But I was sort of shocked at how indifferent he was catching me. I go back to my conversation and he says, "If you change your mind," and lets the trail of thought off while walking away backwards, eyes still on me. I call my boyfriend after and tell him about this exchange, and he tells me to find a security guard. I look around for one, but couldn't find one. It was creepy, because I've never seen an airport so deserted. I end up just deciding to move again, and lay down between two different aisles out of view. A boy my age walks by and asks why I'm laying on the floor, and I respond a little aggressively, "Because I want to." He laughs and puts his hands up, the unspoken sign for, "Whoa, take it easy, got a badass over here." I apologize for my gruffness and tell him that a man was making me nervous. He jokingly said he'll protect me, and because he seems harmless and I mention my boyfriend, I converse with him for a while. And he tells me he saw me and wondered why the blonde girl was looking so sad. A little while later, I'm thankful I did not brush off this stranger, because I see the man again walking around. We made eye contact, but he did not attempt to approach me, because I was no longer alone. Maybe he was just some middle-aged man trying to get a girlfriend or something. But scaring someone isn't the way to do it. Even if he meant me absolutely no harm, he was too aggressive and angry. Of course, all of this is on the more optimistic side, whereas, realistically, and through his lies, I am of the persuasion that his intentions were far more dubious. And if my kindness wouldn't have faltered, and I would have gone with him, as stupid as that may have been, who knows? I may not even have been around to tell this story. This past summer, my younger sister and I went to visit family and friends out of state. My sister at the time was 16, and I myself was 18. Just for some reference, my sister and I look very alike, but a lot of the time, I get told that she looks way older than me, like she would be in her 20s. You see, she's got a good 5 inches on me. She took all the height genes, and both of us are very loud and obnoxious, especially when we're together. Okay, we arrive at the local airport, and my parents, of course, freak out and worry, and then send us off. We went to our local airport, which is pretty small in comparison to the size of this city that we live in. My sister and I find our gate, and we were there at least an hour before. My sister and I find our gate and realize that we will be waiting an additional hour because our plane had to make an emergency landing. Yay! Because some passenger was feeling a bit sick or something, which obviously delayed our process. Anyway, we were sitting around and were completely by ourselves. Now, the airport really isn't big. Once you get through security, you make a left to where some gates are, or a right to where the other gates are, and they have a few shops and restaurants in between the gates. We were at the closest gate possible to where all the restaurants and stuff were located, and there had to be at least 3 other gates down past us. So we were at A, and there was B and C and D at the end. We were sitting alone. Our flight really didn't have many people, and we were extremely early anyway. And there were at least 100 other vacant seats. I'm sitting on the floor in order to charge my phone, whilst watching Netflix, and my sister is doing exactly the same thing. When all of a sudden, a weird older guy just decided to sit right across from us. Mind you, there were at least 100 other seats that were completely empty. But no, this guy had to come and sit right next to us. What a flipping genius. Anyway, he was really skinny, and he reminded me a lot of the murderer character from the Lovely Bones film. So me and my sister are doing this small chit-chat in between watching our shows, and we keep hearing the announcements about our flight, and both keep cracking jokes and making comments as we always do, and just messing around. Common for 2 teenage girls. Almost every single thing we say, this guy laughs at. I mean, I know when we're together we're funny, but he would joke at even the most inappropriate things. For example, I said, "Would you like some water?" And he just started laughing hysterically. Another time I said, "Wow, this is taking a while." Not even remotely funny. And he bursts into a fit of laughter. Okay, at this point I'm concerned. This guy is probably a little bit out of sorts. But I'm not going to say anything. That is when I get very alert, and my paranoia starts eating away at me, especially since I always listen to these scary stories. I'm always aware of my situation, so I keep my eye on this dude as he kept watching my sister and I most of the time, especially with his eyes on my sister. Like I said before, I'm on my phone watching Netflix when all of a sudden my sister sends me a text. "I think this guy is taking pictures of me." I didn't even say anything back, as I was a little shocked. I replied, "Are you sure?" She said yes. And that's when my full crazy sister mode was enabled. You see, my sister and I are extremely close. I would give my life defending her, as I'm sure she would for me. And I don't put up with any shit. Neither does she. She's feisty. But I could tell that she was scared. As soon as I look up to give this guy a piece of my mind, he just got up and left. He looked like he was about to shit a ton of bricks. I turned to my sister, asking her what happened, and she just said that she was on her phone and looked up to see him with his phone tilted right at her. I said maybe he wasn't taking pictures, but she said that she could just tell based on the way he was acting. He was acting in the same way a teenage girl does when she's trying to secretly take a picture of a cute boy and isn't being discreet about it. After talking to her about it, I was angry. Like, who even are you taking pictures of a 16-year-old? I got up and walked down the gates to the direction the guy went in. And I shit you not, I walked up our section of gates at least 5 times, and he was nowhere. Mind you, I didn't enter the men's room. I texted my mum, and she freaked out, telling me to go to the flight attendants and speak to a security guard. But I let it go, considering the fact that I couldn't find and point out the guy myself, which now I realise was a mistake. He would have obviously been in the security footage, and obviously would have had to go on a flight. So more likely than not, they would have been able to check his phone, validate the claim, and then we would have been able to go on from there. But I wasn't thinking straight. The weirdest part besides him taking pictures was that when me and my sister boarded the flight, the man did not. He didn't return to the gate and wasn't on our flight at all. So he was just sitting right across from us for no reason other than to be a weirdo. I am currently 22, and this happened when I was 10ish. I had a cell phone at the time, but only because my parents travelled for their work, so I stayed with my grandparents while my parents were on the road. My dad was working a job in Austin, but my mum was home with me. I had a break in school, spring break or Christmas, I can't remember. So my mum and I decided to fly down to Austin to see him. My mum is a smoker, and me being 10, she didn't want me to be in the cigar room in the airport, which was basically a glass box full of smoke. So we leave our gate and head down that way. Thankfully, there's a bookstore about 10 feet from the cigar room, which also has mostly glass windows. So my mum sends me to the bookstore and sits close to the door of the cigar room so that she can see me. Before we parted ways, my mum told me to send her a text message saying, "I really want this book if I get hinky vibes from anyone." Well, I'm a reader, so I think I'll look for a while until my mum is ready to get me. There probably won't be any issue. After about 5 minutes of being in the bookstore, I notice a guy walk in. I really only remember his grey suit and black dress shoes. I notice his shoes come over by where I am to the thriller section. So I move away to another section where he promptly follows me again. I assumed it was just coincidence since I was still looking at more mature books and move over a few feet to another section where they have books on racks in the middle of the floor rather than on shelves on the wall. The guy moves over to the same rack I'm at, but to the other side. My freakometer was going off like crazy, which is rarely wrong. So I do one last thing to test my theory of this guy, and I walk over to the little kids section, like the Hungry Caterpillar type books, and the guy follows me again. I am sufficiently freaked out, so I go back to the thriller section, which is the closest to the checkout. I pick up random books and text my mum. I really want this book. Not 2 seconds later, I smell my mum's perfume and hear her say, "Oh good, you found something." We promptly pay and leave. Once we were away from the store, I told my mum what happened, and she told me that she had seen the guy follow me across the store twice and immediately walked over because her freakometer was off the charts. She hadn't even gotten my message yet because she was already walking over. Before we go back to our gate, we stop at the ladies' room, and I notice the bookstore guy coming down that hall and silently point it out to my mum, who went on high alert. After the ladies' room, we head to our gate where we see bookstore guy sitting 2 seats down from our luggage. So my mum sat down right next to me on the plane entrance and grabbed our stuff. After we boarded the plane, the bookstore guy is only a couple of rows away from us, but we can't really move because it's a plane. Finally, we have a layover midway between Nashville and Austin. I didn't notice the rest of this, but my mum did. The guy got off right behind us and followed us to our next gate. My mum was just pissed at this point and ready to throw down with this guy, but won't because I'm with her. We verify where our gate is and our next plane's ETA and take off to the smoking area, another glass box filled with smoke, where she brought me in with her and smoked the fastest cigarette ever. Apparently, the guy had followed across the airport to the cigar room and just stood outside waiting. We stopped in a gift shop so I could get my dad a gift and grab a drink, and he followed us there too. Finally, my mum has had more than enough, but isn't going to confront him personally because he hasn't done anything or engaged us in any serious way. So, we get back to our gate, where my mum tells the lady by the plane entrance what's been going on since Nashville. She calls security, and these 2 huge security guards come down to our gate and start talking to my mum, who says very loudly and pointing, "That's the man following us since we arrived at the airport in Nashville. He's making us very uncomfortable." After telling them the full story, after hearing my mum be loud and seeing her point directly at him, bookstore guy takes off running. So security call for backup and follow him. And 2 minutes later, we boarded our plane to Austin without the creepy guy from the bookstore. About 20 students, myself included, from my university did a study abroad program in France last summer. We were spending a week in Paris before going to the town where the university was located. Most of the group got a group flight deal to Paris through the university. Others flew separately. The only requirement was that we had to be in Paris by the day we had to leave to go to our university. Most of us had arrived by the 3rd day into our Paris trip, except my friend Amanda. Naturally, we were all worried about her because her phone wasn't working. She had to update us from Facebook whenever she could get free Wi-Fi, which wasn't very often. Her flight had been delayed 6 times already. Another day passed, and still nothing from Amanda. We were all freaking out at this point, since her phone wasn't working, and we had no way of getting in contact with her. So, the 5th day rolls around, still nothing. We all had a scheduled bike tour of the city that morning, and a boat ride on the river that afternoon, so we didn't return to the hotel until about 7 that evening. When I got in, Amanda was asleep in our room, as we were assigned roommates. Of course, I woke her up and asked her where the hell she'd been. She told me that when she finally got to the airport, she was exhausted and broke. She had multiple layovers and had basically spent all her on-hand cash on food, plus her bank card wasn't working. For those of you unfamiliar with Charles de Gaulle Airport, it is massive. Unless you have a map or understand French completely, you will most certainly get lost. So she gets there, lost, broke, tired, hungry, and carrying 3 big-ass bags sitting inside the terminal. She said this good-looking guy walked up to her and started speaking to her in perfect English, which to her was a huge relief. "You look tired, madam. Do you need a taxi to your hotel?" This was the first red flag. What taxi driver gets out of his cab and walks into the airport to find a rider? Not thinking, and naturally being absolutely finished, she says, "Oh yes, thank you. I am so exhausted." He smiles at her and grabs one of her heavier bags and tells her to follow him. She does, and he leads her to this elevator. Red flag number 2. She was already on street level from where all the taxis depart. She gets inside and hits the button for the basement level. He gets on the phone before the elevator opens and starts speaking in French, which she couldn't really understand because it was slang, and she starts freaking out when the doors open. It was the service deck, meant for employees of the airport, not for passengers parking or taxi pickup. It was damp and dark, and as she said, something literally out of a horror movie. The guy gets out of the elevator first and turns to her smiling. "Allons-y," he says, which translates to "let's go." She takes a few more steps and sees in the far corner of the deck the trunk of this green unmarked van with no license plate and a huge ugly ass Middle Eastern guy step out of the driver's seat. At this point, she realizes she's in trouble, but she doesn't want to alert the smiling guy that she's about to get out of there. There's no one in sight, so screaming would be useless, but the lift door is still open. So she quickly placed one of her bags in the middle of the lift entrance and told the smiley guy that she still needed her wallet that was in the bag he was carrying. He looks at her sternly for a minute, but walks over to her and hands her the bag. She told me she pushed him down to the ground with the weight of the bag and got into the elevator as fast as she could. He got up and was bounding after her. She said, "Girl, I hit every goddamn button on the elevator panel. The doors closed as soon as he reached her, and she could hear him banging on the doors as she was going back up to street level. She got to the taxi pickup lane and started bawling. A police officer approached her and told him what happened, and he drove her to the hotel. On the way, he told her that the men were likely linked to a sex trafficking ring and were approaching young women inside the airport who had tags on their luggage indicated they had come from the US, assuming that American women were more trusting. Bonus story. So I like to think of myself as a funny guy, as I'm sure the majority of people I've met would completely disagree, but I deserve gold stars for my persistence if nothing else. Besides, haters gonna hate. And just as those haters will hate, so too will airport security take any half-assed terrorism jokes extremely seriously. For the past few days, I've been on a lovely business trip, and part of the trip involved orchestrating a photo shoot. That meant I had all my camera equipment with me, which I'd packed away into a travel case and checked in as hold luggage as I prepared to catch my flight back. As I was going through the usual border checks, I had a member of airport staff who seemed to be a bit of a joker. When I asked if I needed to remove my shoes before going through the scanner, as I've yet to experience any airport that consistently asks either way, the member of staff joked, saying, "Nah, you can leave them on. I already know you're a terrorist anyway." I was temporarily stunned by the joke, but being a scrawny, nerdy white male, and not really the prime candidate for any terror organization, I returned the joke, saying, "Ah, damn, you got me. Lucky I already checked in my hold luggage, eh?" Now, at 24, I really should know better. But I really don't. And I really shouldn't have returned the joke. This comment was overheard by airport security, who took me to the side and started asking questions and asked for my boarding pass, as well as my baggage claim receipt. They then took me to a side room. This was particularly awkward, as I wasn't allowed to put my previously removed belongings on, and I quite really needed that belt. So I had to scurry along, security in tow, while holding up my trousers to prevent adding indecent exposure to the list of offences. In this room, they asked me about the exchange, where I was going, where I came from. They also removed my hold luggage from the flight, believing it contained explosives or the like. At this time, I didn't there believe to be too much danger. It was a joke that I reciprocated. So once they assessed the luggage, I should be fine, right? Wrong. Well, apparently, the reflectors I'd bought to the photo shoot didn't show up too well in the scanner. Apparently, the staff scanning the case believed it to be some sort of wire-based contraption. Oh boy, I thought. The damn joker member of staff really screwed me on this one. There was a lot of back and forth explaining, and to streamline the event, I eventually explained to them that I was doing a photo shoot and that it was a reflector. I showed them the camera in my carry-on luggage and also the shoot plan I made. Eventually, they let me go after my planned flight, and thus my colleagues had departed. So I had to purchase another flight at my expense, and am now going through the process again. Except this time, I'm not going to joke about terrorism, though I might headbutt that scanner guy